Good afternoon to you all. Welcome to another episode of UncommonCents with Craig Kamanis and our special guest star today, Fraser Jack. Good afternoon to you both. Fraser, let's jump in and get started with you. Craig and I often talk about wearing many hats in the jobs that we do and the roles that we do. And you wear, I think, a ton of different hats. Tell the listeners and the watchers a couple of the hats that you're wearing now and what's got you excited about them.
Oh my goodness, and that's the end of the show. No, so I've got I'm wearing a lot of hats. I've worn a lot of hats over many years as well, too. By the way, I was an advisor for many years and sold my practice and did some work in licensing, and then did some work in technology. So I've worn the technology hat, which I love the idea of technology, and I also swap it out often for the cybersecurity hat, which is you think is as a bit of an overlap with technology, and it kind of does, but the rule number one when you're working in technology is everything's got to work, and it's got to work really well, and it's got to be really simple and easy to use. Rule number one in security is you've got to stop everything working really well, make it really hard to use. So they are opposite. They're opposite and fun hats to interchange.
Indeed. And so today we're going to focus on the cybersecurity hat, but obviously the three of us are coming from the context of running advice practices, licensees, and being responsible managers and trying to navigate this world. And so there's a really good chance that you're a Telstra, Optus, Medibank Private customer. And so we've been talking about this for a very long time, Fraser, but it just comes up, obviously, with larger companies that are getting caught out that we kind of hoped that they might have been ahead of the small business in terms of some of these protections. Do you think large companies are ahead of it compared to small businesses?
Oh, look, they're definitely ahead of it. They've definitely got resources and they've got chief technology officers and they've got chief security officers, and those two work, as I said, together but against each other. And they have teams. They have, red teams and blue teams and purple teams. And they're teams that, a red team is somebody that's attacking your own business, and the blue team is somebody that's defending your business, and the purple team works between the two to make things good. So they have these things, right? But there's just I think every single business, if you put enough effort into it, can be hacked, and that's the problem, right? So the big businesses get more attention, and everybody likes the kudos of attacking the big business. It's the big catching the big marlin, if you like, if you put a fishing terminology over it. But it's about understanding that all these things can be attacked if you put enough effort into them, and the big names get the big media, right? The media, off the back of what's happened recently in recent times, is found it's great clickbait, so they create lots of articles, and that drives again then that awareness from consumers, which is a good thing, because consumers have been really sort of docile to this conversation for a while, as have a lot of professional firms and a lot of businesses. So especially the smaller business, where it's confusing and confronting and difficult to know where to start and all those sort of things, because you don't have the security team or in-house tech team. So yeah, there's a lot recently around that. Obviously, it's a consumer based issue these days. Instead of sort of top down, it's become this bottom up as well, and meeting in the middle, which has been really interesting. But of course, people getting caught up in having their data compromised is an interesting piece, and I've got a bit of a theory around how we should be treating data, and we should be treating it's not the oil or the gold or all those sort of things. I actually like to think of it as diamonds. It is diamonds. It is the client's diamonds and those clients are entrusting professional firms to safely safeguard and protect those diamonds. And if you take that mindset approach to it, then all of a sudden you go, oh, hang on a minute. If clients are giving me diamonds, I'm not going to get them just to post them to me in the regular mail. We're going to make sure we have a secure transfer of those diamonds. And we're going to do all these things to protect the diamonds, and our staff are going to take these diamonds seriously, and we're going to really protect them, and we're going to keep them locked up in the vault inside, rather than just leaving them around the office. So.
Good man. All right. Well, we're going to roll with the diamond analogy for the whole session today, in a variety of different ways. So as we go through, we'll think about these diamonds, and probably my question as well as we go through this, guys, is should we have the diamonds? Should we have the diamonds in in the first place? Should we have them? Should we keep them? How do we know that we still have them? So we'll work through that. So the first thing that I wanted to chat about, just in terms of the theory, is this idea of the technology versus the human. And so the thing that I think about is that I think that an iPhone is relatively hard to hack until it's in a human's hand. So it's like, who's actually at fault here, Fraser, when you think about it? Is it the technology, or is it that actually it ends up being user error?
Yeah, without throwing blame around, of course. I would have to say it's a combination of the two, right? You have to have one to make the other one a problem. The technology essentially is locked doors and locked gates and locked windows and all these locks we have on the physical. So if we go back to the diamond analogy and the physical premises, these are the locks, and they do work. But our staff are trained to be really, really, really hospitable and really nice to our clients and really, be polite. And so, the staff are the ones that are opening the door, unlocking the door and opening it up to say hello to the potential client, or who they think is going to be a friendly. And in a lot of cases, that friendly, they think it might be the business owner or the manager or the CEO that's talking to them, where it's not. And so there is a lot of, in that respect, to the staff element, but the staff are only as good as what they're trained to be, right? So they're currently trained to be very nice to clients. If you want them to be protecting your clients' diamonds, then it's the onus is on the business to train the staff to be that way. So you are not only just, a friendly, hospitable person, but you're also the security guard, and to make sure that you're being aware and looking out. But, you can't expect staff to do that if you haven't given them the direction and training in the first place.
I think that's a really good point, Fraser. And that's, this was once probably considered the tech division's issue. Like if something cyber happened, it's the technology division, if you've got one. I mean, small businesses don't really have one. It's whoever, set up their computers for them, normally outsourced, etc. But it's really now drifted into like an organizational right across the business issue, hasn't it? Because, we've seen examples of payroll team members getting emails from the director changing their bank account for their pay, and just, oh, well, they want me to update their pay, and it's not their bank account. And 2 months later, they're wondering why they're not being paid. So it's really, to your point there, become an organizational issue, and ignoring it and just not updating team members is going to just create more havoc, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And you can't blame those team members for doing what they were asked to do if they haven't been reminded. But you're absolutely right. The technology, and this comes back down to the tech conversation. If I put my tech hat on, I want those emails to go through, because I'm not getting people ringing me up saying my emails aren't working. What's going on? I didn't get this email from this person who wanted their pay updated, and now it hasn't gone through. So it's about saying, having that fine balance, I guess. But you're right. It's across the organization. I love the idea that you just mentioned, the assumption there. The assumption that we make is the tech team did it, right? Because they set all this up and we didn't understand what they did, but surely they did it. And the tech team's going, you never asked us to do that. That wasn't part of the remit, So everybody's looking at each other and finger pointing. And I guess that the point about finger pointing, it's like it's too late, by the time that happens. The damage is done, and you could have lost half or 3/4 of your clients out of your client base because of it.
Absolutely. I think back in the days, it might have been the participation of IT is that we were doing physical backups, and you were taking hard drives out of the thing and putting a new hard drive in, and you were sort of participating in the problem. And then, but quite rightly, you only know if that worked after the fact. So you were like, oh, I've had my stuff deleted. Let me go to the backup and see if I'll restore from the backup. And sometimes in history, the backup wasn't actually working. And so not only do we have to train and build a system that obviously everyone participates in, but then we've got to test it as well. Like, we've got to make, in that red team, blue team concept, it's like, who's actually challenging to knock on the wall, pretending to be a client, to see how we go.
Yeah, and you're exactly right in that you mentioned the sort of the vulnerability testing, that testing piece as well, around staff being tested, and there's certain things in a lot of the guidelines around for the legislators, for the Privacy Act and the privacy principles, and and ASIC and those sorts of regulators that talk about the idea of vulnerability testing and that you've actually tested your staff in that space, that you've tested your backups, that you've got these recovery plans in place. And so there is a lot of stuff that sort of is difficult for small business because they're not really across it and haven't really dipped into it. And they've had, let's face it, they've had plenty to do over the last few years with chops and changes around implementing new things into their business. And this might have been on the list, but it's definitely been further down the list.
Keeps getting pushed down. So what are some quick wins, Fraser, just in terms of like a checklist for advice business owners and advisors, and even down to the staff? Like what are some of the things that when you go into a business and look at them and you say, these are a few things that you must have?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess if I start, if we start from the from where anything's going to come into your business along the internet highway, if you like, or the road, if you imagine the road outside your house, and if we go back to the diamond analogy, then these diamonds are traveling backwards and forth along the internet highway and lots of other information and vehicles. Often the first point of call for our business is either our mailbox out the front of our house, or our inbox, if you like to call it that. We're going to talk about inbox and email as the letterbox, and then and so that's a bit of a concern. Not very many letterboxes are locked. Most of them are open, and anybody can come and stick anything in there. If you take your mail out of your letterbox and you take it inside and you store it in your CRM or your filing cabinet, often you will remove, in the real life, in the real world, you remove those physical letters, but often we leave those letters in our mailbox, which is our DNS or our online version of our email. And if somebody comes along, then often they can have a look in there, and that's when they start manipulating conversations with staff or with, like you said, payroll. So email is a big thing, I think. Understanding that your gates to your property or your house is the gateway, are your routers in the digital world, and understanding that you want to make sure you put locks on those and lock them down. Don't have easy, Telstra and admin as your password. So I think that's a pretty quick win. Understand that gateway should be locked, and if you don't know how to do that, chat to your local nerds or your IT teams about.
And what's happening at that point in time in terms of if I've hacked into your router, am I just sharing your internet to download videos, or what's the more risky bit if I've got access to your router?
Yeah, if you get into the router, often you can get into the computers or on the system as well. So, and so I'll give you an example, a really well-known example. A casino in Las Vegas got hacked, and they lost their high rollers list and a number of other data. And the way that they got hacked was through the thermometer on their tropical fish tank, because it was connected to their Wi-Fi. So our homes and businesses are filled with all of these Internet of Things, right? You've probably got a music player over there. You might have some other device over there. You might have a light bulb or a door lock or a little doorbell or something. We love these little Internet of Thing knickknacks, but they have zero security on them. So it's about understanding that needs to be locked up from that point of view, and everybody's different. Everyone's got different stuff. So that router, that is that gateway. It's the gateway it's the way that your home and your products and your computers and your systems talk to the outside world on the interweb. So it's about locking down those gateways.
So Fraser, you're telling me my brand new Google doorbell, which I'm loving because I know when someone's at the door, they can actually be hacking into, not that they're going to get much from the Commander's household, but they could be hacking into the systems here and having a good look around.
I'm just saying, you want to make sure your router's nice and secure because you've got that. So yeah, congratulations on that. You heard it here. It's on LinkedIn. Just letting everybody knows now. That was a bit of a brief anyway. So that's probably ones that you're right about. The staff are the people that are opening the doors, and it's about training, ongoing awareness, and bringing those staff that are in your business now, giving them a new hat, which is a security hat, and getting them to understand what to look. Security champion is always good in a small business too. Somebody that actually takes the lead and brings the other staff members along, reminds them that they need to update their Chrome browser or whatever it is. And then we get into all the doors and locks, and that comes back down to strong antivirus, your systems the way they're set up. If you're using 365, do you have all the security settings set up, and getting in and making sure that those locks are actually locked, and that's really the requirement of some people who know what they're doing in that tech world, to be able to say, I want you to approach this from a lock point of view, from a security point of view, not just a make it work point of view. Can we go through all the security features which are in there and make sure all those things are in place?
And I think
sorry, mate, you go, Dean.
I was just going to say on that, Craig, is that the idea that our browsers prompt us to leave the gate open, just to follow the analogy, in that you log into a website and it offers you, do you want to remember your password? Do you want to save my username? Do you want to reduce the number of times you log in? There's all this convenience factor that gets offered to the user, and maybe this goes back to education. The user's going, why would I want to remember my password? Of course, Google, please remember it for me.
Yeah, passwords are a very interesting thing that we sort of haven't covered yet. But you're right, passwords are actually on their way out. By the way, passwords are being phased out in the long term. And you think about your phone, for example. You mentioned before you used to put a passcode in it, but now you just hold it up and it looks at your face. Other devices and banking is going that way. There's fingerprint ID on a lot of devices as well. So those biometrics are coming in a little bit more as well as passwords, because passwords aren't the ultimate. They were a stopgap. They're okay for a reason, and then they move their they're becoming harder and harder to demonstrate that is actually you, just because you know the password.
Yep.
So passwords are interesting. Obviously a quick win there is to always make sure, you start with a password manager, get everything on there, make sure your passwords are different, they're long and strong. The long and strong password, I know you've talked about this before, is around making it harder and longer for that to get into.
I'll put that on the screen while we're talking. Like I think that's one of the myths, Fraser, about exclamation marks and @ symbols in the password. It actually, to a computer, is irrelevant, because an exclamation mark and the letter Q or a capital Q is not that much difference to something that's doing brute force. And so this just shows very simply, anyone can get this on Google, but the key is actually having something that's 18 characters in length is better, even if it's just numbers, than having a really complicated but yet short password.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. Though it's about length, and often password security, they talk about the concept of maybe having a full sentence, for example, and the sentence can be, this is the Commander's household, and we do this, that, and the other, whatever. But it's something that the whole thing won't remember, but it's long and strong. And so you mentioned that the word brute force there, which for those that are listening, a brute force hacking tool is something that continually guesses the passwords and just continually submits until it's in place. One of the ways, though, around that, if you've got passwords, is to also make sure that when you're logging into certain things, and what we're talking about mostly is when you're logging into somewhere that holds your client's diamonds, right? So your database, maybe your email, maybe those systems that you have in place around your work systems, your quoting tools, your checking of your platforms or your insurers. Making sure they've got long and strong passwords, but also making sure that if the password gets entered incorrectly for a certain amount of times, it keeps locking you out. So, so that way that brute force hacking tool throws a couple of options in, but then it has to wait 4 days until the next option. And so by then you've worked out that, hang on a minute, something's not right here. We can't get into our XYZ platform or.
And that's a signal that's the education. If you've logged onto a website and put your password in and you think you got it right, or you got it right, but it says that it's been locked due to too many wrong attempts, that's actually a signal to say something might be wrong here.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect example of when to get on the phone or contact in another way the supplier and say, or the provider, and say, hey, something's going on here.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think as an advice business owner, particularly with the latest bigger firms being put into the media, it's actually also then heightened this whole thing for their clients. And we've been getting feedback lately oh, the client doesn't want to give me their license anymore to hold a copy for AML reasons and all of that. So like the public now are in every interaction really starting to ramp up and go, gee, I don't know if I want to give that to you anymore, or I want you to hold it. And so there's probably a seismic adjustment that many industries need to make on this stuff. But what it does, Fraser, is it throws up a whole lot of trust issues amongst businesses. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, is it normal for an organization to call a business and say, you know, like, we're operating in a cybersecurity space, we believe you've been hacked or your data has been breached, and that, you know, here is evidence of that and you need to deal with that straight away? Is that something that happens?
Yeah. So there's probably two really good points here. One is around the idea of sharing the information, and as part of actually an obligation that you are part of, based on the fact that you were the privacy principles and ASIC, that you should be sharing that what happened and how it happened and where it happened to, so that everybody can win and gain, and you know, it's the rising tide scenario. I want to touch on what you said there about the concept of clients not wanting to give their license across. This is actually right now is actually a really incredible opportunity to have these conversations with clients. And I've been hearing some really good feedback from advice firms that are doing this now around the concept of shifting away from sharing things from email through to a client portal process where it's shared. Again, these diamonds are not put in the mail; they're shared through a secure service. And it's been the case where for many years people would say, oh, we want to move to a client portal, and clients go, that's painful. Can I just email it to you? It's easier. And they go, oh yeah, you're right, you know, and haven't really pushed too hard. Whereas now the conversation with the client is, hey, you know, based on everything that's gone on, things have changed. We now don't send it in email anymore just to protect your diamonds. You know, we treat your data like it is diamonds, and so we don't send it through the mail anymore. We have this much more secure portal, and this is the way we're doing it. We're also going to go back and audit our email and get rid of all of those diamonds that you sent us previously, and make sure they're in our vault. And then we suggest you do the same. Go through your own email and get rid of your copies of your tax returns and driver's license and all these other things. You don't have to delete the emails, but you could delete the attachments, and you could archive the emails, or you could delete the emails. And by doing that project, clients are going, thank you. Like, it's not a pain, it's a thank you. And then when the next time when you ask them for their driver's license, they're like, oh yeah, we'll do it through that secure client portal. So I think like with any change, there's opportunity. And I think this is one of the times where you mentioned that there has been the change. We have shifted, the consumers have shifted. So there's the opportunity to go forward and talk to your advice firms and to talk to their clients about it.
And it creates a short-term friction, just like you said. It's easier to email it through, but we have to say that security and privacy has to be paramount in this context. And so if it takes a little bit longer to do it, we have to do it.
But then we could also drive a lot faster if we didn't have those pesky speed signs, right?
No, the speed bumps are the ones that really annoy me.
Yeah. So the ones that
I already have blinkers on and don't see the signs.
Already, all those signs that slow us down for safety. Yeah, exactly the same thing, right? It's about the attitude. Within so many other aspects of our life, we see these signs and we just adhere to them. And this is only weird because it's a new thing, right? Having to do multi-factor authentication and pull up an app and just having to do things in a slightly different way. It's only painful because it's a slightly different to what we're used to. But then you think about the fact that it's a safety sign, or, you know, slowing somebody down on a really dangerous corner. You think, oh, that's actually worth it.
It's there for a reason, to protect us. Absolutely. So let's go through a couple of myths that might be relevant for people, just in terms of mythbusters, as we knew back in the day. So some people used to tell me, Fraser, that Apple Macs were like much stronger and couldn't get hacked compared to ye old Windows machines. What do you reckon?
I don't necessarily think it's about the quality of the product. I actually think it's about the fact that you can, as a junior programmer, everything's about programming on Windows, and there's a lot of courses that teach you how to do that. And it's about the ecosystem of Windows has always been, they go back to the old IBM compatible days. It was all around going, how do we make computers compatible with other computers, doesn't matter what brand they are. And that has formed an ecosystem where there is a lot more ability to learn how to code and create those things within Windows system. Within Apple was obviously Windows was a big part of the market, and Apple was, the iOS was a smaller part of the market. And so programming through that system means we had to submit everything to Apple for them to check and then add it up. So it was painful. And so I guess the comes back to the point that creating viruses and malware was easier to create it on Windows. So the path of least resistance has been to create a lot of the stuff for Windows-based machines. One, because it's the 80-20, it's a bigger part of the business market. And two, because most businesses, especially large businesses, they run off Windows. So, why would you bother developing a malware for Apple when you can just do it for Windows? And that's where all of you target. That's the pond you want to fish in. So that's been some of it. I guess the ecosystem behind all that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that Apple's harder to hack. It just means that somebody has to want to do it. And I think, again, the hardware is not always the thing that's being hacked. It's the human connecting with the hardware, and whether they're on an Apple or whether they're on a Windows device may be irrelevant.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said. Well said. So maybe there is a little bit of truth there, but it's always to the human at the end of the day. Yep. What about OneDrive or Google Drive or Dropbox? And the big thing that I see with this is that they actually make copies of the file and copy them onto the human's machine. So if I'm a financial planning business with 10 staff and they all have a laptop, is it right in saying that there's now 10 copies of my driver's license on those 10 computers, and therefore if one of those computers is lost, that data could be accessible because it's on the physical machine?
Yeah, I guess the short answer to that is yes. Dropbox has not been considered to be one of the safe options for business use. Fine if you want to, share your photos with your family and friends, great. Good system. But you're right, it does download a copy onto local machines instead of keeping it in the cloud. And that can cause a problem if you lose your machine. You could say, well, that's an extra backup, right? But the problem with a lot of those things is they continually back up. So if you download a virus to the online system, it's still going to download the virus to all of the other products as well that it's onto. So it's about going, how do I do that? How do I keep it in a secure place? Again, think of it like your diamonds. If you've got them everywhere, spread everywhere, then you're more likely to people to be able to see them or access them.
Absolutely. Craig?
Yeah. Just to go back, like having your team members all prepped and all of that kind of thing. How extreme does this go, though? Because I fear we get to this point where no one's going to want to interact with anybody. No one's going to want to talk to anybody. They're all going to be cynics on, is that really the person I'm speaking to? Should I really give them that? Should I really not give them that? What's your advice to a business? Because you're coming in obviously going, this is how to protect yourself and that. But does anyone raise and talk about the emotional part of this and the effect it's going to have on teams?
I think we do this now, right? We've got the stranger danger thing going on in our heads right now. If you walk down the street, you don't chat to everybody, right? You don't go and, how are you going? What are you doing? Here's my driver's license. You don't behave that way in real life. So I think we're just going to bring it back towards where that physical sense is. And it's not that you have to distrust people, but, that concept of, is that really you? needs to happen. I guess when we see, when we pass each other walking down the street, we say good day. But if we're not quite sure because it looks like you and it might not be you, then we go, is that oh yeah, you're good. It is you. Like it takes a second, but it's doing that. It's doing the multi-factor checking. If you get an email, you ring up and say, hey, Craig, did you send me that? Did you send me that email? And like, yeah, I did. Oh, good. No, just double checking. Wanted to make sure I didn't so it's and that's fine, like you would go, oh yeah, no worries, that's fair enough. But it's doing that multi-factor checking and the same thing with I think most planners do that now, right, with their clients. If they get, hey, can you change my payments into this account, and they're like, did you actually make that email? So
yeah, and I think the last thing, the increased awareness goes to privacy in general, Fraser, and we all have this challenge of going, well, what information do we must have on file forever, versus this idea of that the client does have the right to understand their data, and the EU is very much advanced in this concept of the right to be forgotten and things like that. And throughout COVID, obviously, everyone was QR coding everywhere and sharing their data with the world in terms of where they were going, what they were doing, and things like that. And now we've got this swing back to we all have to be mindful about where is our data and whoever we actually shared it with. And it's really an individual responsibility. And if I ask my client for their driver's license, I've got to actually now give them the reasons why. I think we can do a better job in setting context as to why do we need it, and then thinking about, do we have the right to pass it on to other people?
Yeah, I think this section will change over time. It's been that the legislation was quite clear. You have to hold it for a long period of time. I think this has been an interesting process to go through with recent events, to be able to say, why do you need to hold it? Surely you need to view it, but do you really need to hold it? And some of those diamonds can be handed back to the clients. Consumer data right, or open banking, as we call it, has some stuff around that as well, around the client being able to dictate where, how, and when that happens. And we should be understanding the clients, what they want to happen in that situation. Like you said, you get it, and then you identify, then you pass it on. I mean, the government's got a really good app, right? My Gov ID app, which is the purpose of that, is to identify somebody, and you've loaded it all into that. So theoretically, if you went, okay, great, send them a my Gov ID link, and it comes back. And so there is technology out there that might catch in this space. But the legislation kind of needs to also be part of that, and just get to say, well, we're going to move away from you having to store it. If you use, say, a MyGov ID or one of those types of AML CTF identifying processes, once you've done it, why do it might not be that you maintain that information on record.
Yeah, well said. And so the last piece of the puzzle that you do, Fraser, is insurance. In terms of helping advice practices get cyber insurance, what gets covered? Like, what is a claim cost and payout, I suppose, more than anything else? Like, what does that look like? What does it cost my business if I don't have it? What do they come in and write checks for?
Yeah, and this is the point where insert Fraser is not an insurance broker.
The disclaimer's already on everything. Don't worry, man.
This is stuff that Fraser found out when he interviewed insurance brokers. So after speaking to many insurance brokers and legal firms and understanding and reading PDSs, the market in cyber insurance is very new, right? So it used to be PI would have and your management liability might have overrides or optional extras, or that included cyber. Those are gone, and they've even excluded. So their wording now excludes cyber, which has opened up that need for that cyber insurance in the middle. I can't tell people to get cyber insurance, but everybody should have it, right?
Yep.
The scenario here is it's hard to get. Insurers don't really want small professional practices that hold all this information about their clients, all these diamonds in an often unsecure zone. It doesn't make a lot of sense from an insurer to have them on the books, right? So it's hard to get, and it's also, think back, PI for financial advice, 10 years ago was on this that's where it's at, and the market's rising. There's unknowns, and there's known unknowns. The premiums are going up, so if you've got it, expect it to go up over the next few years. But it's on that rising market space where that PI was 10 years ago, and the way that it works, it's a bit like PI in its claims made basis. So you have to have a policy in place at the moment you find out you got a claim, and the average time someone can spend in a system is up to 211 days, right? Which is just 7 months somebody can be in a system. But it's not about whether they were in the system before you had the cover. It's about whether you had the cover when you found out that somebody's in your system. And so it's about making sure that you've got cover in place before not necessarily before they got in. Think of it a little bit like your health insurance, where you go and spend some money on something, it's going to reimburse. It doesn't just give you a payout like life insurance does. It's more like the concept of, if you spend the money, you've got to engage lawyers to make sure that you're not in the event of something happening to you today. You've got to engage lawyers, you've got to engage PR people, you've got to engage your insurer. Your insurer's job really is to help you make sure you've got those people in place as well, because you've got to make sure you get your legal obligations to legislation correct. You've got to make sure you're notifying your clients in the timeframes that are set out within the Privacy Act, that you're doing all the right things, that you've got to pay for a security IT company to come in and trawl through all the systems and logs and work out, forensically work out what happened and how it happened. You might have to do reporting obligations and submissions to the regulators. You might be fines involved, all these sort of things, and that's what it covers.
Yep.
The main thing it really covers is make good, right? A bit like, think about your PI. It's the job of your PI and any insurance really is to make good. So your obligations are, you as a professional firm that signed up to the privacy principles, you asked your clients to give you their diamonds.
Yep.
Right? And so it's up to you to protect those diamonds. If it gets lost, from however it gets lost, your job is to try and make good, right? So understand that, how that's going to work, and like the practices. You think of the breach recently where driver's licenses were taken, and there is new driver's licenses being issued with new numbers, right? And so that all costs a lot of money, and firms, I know financial advice firms that have been doing that as well, and spent well over $1 million and going into the MyGov accounts and fixing up all the tax returns that were changed, reissuing all the driver's licenses for all their clients that was stored in their CRM, and so it's there is a lot of work and all the teams of people to do all that sort of stuff.
So this idea that Mr. Albanese stood up to make Optus make new passports for everyone is actually, it could be, there's a truth in it that people have to actually go to a very far limit on making people good again or whole again, as in is paying for passports really in that, you think?
Yeah, it could well be.
Yeah.
It could well be. If somebody has a copy of your passport and they've got your passport number, you might have to cancel that passport and get a passport with a new number. And so, the cost associated with that could be borne by the firm. And if you've got,
and I think it's the time as well, Fraser, and the distraction, obviously, from your core business. Notwithstanding, you may have clients leaving, but just the actual hours that you have to put into making clients whole again, regardless of whether they stay or go, as well as trying to do everything else in your advice practice. So
yeah, absolutely. And there's been some recent studies done recently. Cordata just are releasing some studies around this as well, around the concept of how many clients are going to stay in your business. I did a survey on LinkedIn that talked about an accounting relationship. Would you leave your accountant, or would you go? The reason I chose accounting is because I was once removed from financial advisors, but also they're a relationship business, right? So people stick with it, loyal to their accountant for many, many years. It's too hard to change. But if the accountant lost all your tax returns and your details and your data, and now all your financials were on the internet for anyone to see, would you stay or would you go? And the results for that, we've had sort of about 80, 90 responses back from that, and it's about 35% would stay and the rest would go. And so
wow.
If you've got an advice business that's $1 million advice business, all of a sudden you could have a $350,000 advice business overnight.
And your cyber insurance isn't covering loss of revenue associated with it.
No, it's not covering loss of revenue associated with that. It's covering all of the make good. And so what you're trying to do with that money is spend it on making sure that you don't just lose 65% of your
absolutely.
Of your client base.
So everyone has to go out and lock their gates. Craig, turn off the doorbell. You can leave it at the front to let people know that you've got a doorbell.
What's the password, Craig?
Obviously, it's password.
Time to give you the 27 characters. If it is 27 characters, it might be. It might not be. Who knows?
Exactly. Keep it safe, Craig. Don't tell the audience. We've got too many listeners. You never know. So that's it for today. Fraser, thanks very much for your time and your expertise. So anyone that watched on LinkedIn, you can click on Fraser's name and have a look at the Cyber Collective and everything that he's doing there as well. And Craig, see you next week. We did 20, so see you next week for 21. Thanks very much for everyone who's listened today and obviously listened after on the podcast. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thanks, Fraser.